Buzz Club since the beginning. Oh, sorry, I always forget to wait for the recording to start. Our next speaker is Dr. Linda Birkin, who has been with the Buzz Club since the very beginning. And she's going to be talking about keeping the spark alive, volunteer retention in citizen science. Over to you, Linda.
Okay, hi folks. As Dave says, I am going to be talking about keeping the spark alive. Mostly, we've had a lot of talks about using citizen science and what sort of projects you can do and what sort of data you can get and how you can get, information that you wouldn't be able to get in any other way. Pertinent point, you need to keep the citizens doing the science, and that is what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to be clicking and it's not changing. There we go. The project that I'm going to be using examples from quite a lot is Bees and Beans. Now, this was a cornerstone project of my PhD. So I did that over I did the project over 3 years, so 2014 to 16. And this was an experimental citizen science project. It was getting people to do a little experiment in their gardens to do some sort of manipulation and see what that resulted in, rather than more of an observational one where you go and get people to look for a specific thing and write it down. What I got people to do was the beans part of this, grow broad bean plants, dwarf broad bean plants, and they needed to grow 3 of them. One would be bagged to exclude pollinators, one was hand pollinated to maximize pollination, and one was left to the attentions of local pollinators. And for broad beans, this would be primarily long-tongue bumblebees. So the idea of this project was to suggest something that you could theoretically set up to use as a monitoring scheme for looking at garden pollination, like are there peaks, are there troughs? Have suddenly, an area not getting bees or not getting pollination, so something might have happened to the local bees. But I was testing it out. So that was the project. When I was doing it across the 3 years, the little graph that I've got on the left here is from my thesis, and this shows the difference, as I learned how to do this better, between completion and engagement rate over those 3 years. So completion was returned data, engagement was stayed interested in the projects, kept talking to me, even if they didn't manage to return data for whatever reason. Both of these improved over the course of the project. In 2014, my first year, for which that's the data that the paper we published between me and Dave is from, I had about 15 or so percent completion rate, which doesn't sound a lot, but as you've heard from some of the other talks in this, citizen science often has a tendency to have quite low return rates. So it's not too bad, but it pretty much doubled by 2016. So I got better at it, and I'm going to be sort of talking about that. So next, this is, before I launch into the more specifics of this, communication. If you take nothing else away from this talk, I will loudly ring the clear communication bell. If you are doing citizen science, you have got to be right up there on your communication, because nothing puts people off more than not knowing what they're meant to be doing, or not being sure how to communicate with you, or not being able to work out what's going on. So your volunteers will be a diversity of individuals. Even if you have targeted the most specific population of a specific little group you have, all of those people are individuals. They will all have different requirements. They will have different abilities and space in their lives to do your project. So you need to make sure that they have got good information so they can make good decisions on whether or not they do it. So you need to be very, very clear about what they're going to need to do. And ideally not change it midway through. I mean, as Janet says, sometimes you need to change it midway through if the heat waves are not behaving, or the specific ecological or biological phenomenon you are studying might be a bit erratic. Tell them that, we want you to do this. It will probably be here. It may be changing. Be aware of that, because then you will be able to pick up if people are more likely to be on holiday. Being on school holiday is often quite a thing that can impact some of these ecological studies, because if you want to look at things with a school group or in a school environment, there is a whole chunk of months in which no one will be recording your data. So you've got to bear that in mind. Being very, very clear about how long it will take. How long it will take to set it up, how long the individual recording observations and things they have to do is going to take, and for how long month-wise, over the course of the year, they're going to have to be doing it. Because people will often think, when you're signing up for something, you think, yeah, that'll be great. And then 3 months later, you're still doing it, and it might become a bit of a chore at that point. One of the things the Buzz Club has found last year and this year, we were trying out some shorter projects, and ones that were very time limited, sort of over a weekend or over a couple of weeks, rather than the much longer ones like Bees and Beans and some of the other ones. And we were getting quite positive feedback on that. So you get different populations of people who are interested in different length projects. Other important bit is what costs are involved. Citizen science is really valuable, but as people have already said, isn't free from the point of view of you, because you need to put a lot of time and effort and energy into managing volunteers and into setting the project up. And it's often not completely free. Well, it's definitely not completely free for the volunteers. They're giving you time and energy, you know, the two resources you can't get back. But also, like, there may be costs involved with what they're doing. So unless you're going to send out a full project pack with absolutely everything in it, which I did do for Bees and Beans in the first year, and it was expensive and very time consuming, if you are asking people to provide some piece of equipment or something like that, so bearing in mind that having any form of cost is going to be a bit, it's going to add almost a level of not quite gatekeeping, but it adds a hurdle to get over. Like, do you have pots? Do you have soil? Do you have sand? Various different things. You can be restricting the people who can take part. This might be unavoidable, but it also is something to take into consideration, so you're not making people feel left out for not having a lot of spare money. So those are the sort of communications before the project starts. You also need to make it really clear how you're going to contact them. So, like, what's your primary means of contacting people? You might use other ones, like if your primary means is email, you may also do Facebook messages or social media or something, but you should have a primary means of, this is where you're going to get your project communications from, so that not only do people know that when a communication comes in, it's legit and they can trust it and they can act on it, but also they know how they can contact you back. Like, they might want to comment on YouTube videos, Facebook pages, whatever you've got going on, but they need to know that if they contact the project email, they're more likely to get a response if they have questions or comments for you. And then if you also, are handling a lot of volunteers and you have a lot of other stuff on your plate, it is a good idea to make sure that people know how long it's likely to take you to reply. So if you just got a thing on your email saying, we aim to reply within 2 working weeks, something like that, just so that everyone is very aware of all the expectations from the beginning. So ring the communication bell, that is extremely important. So why am I calling this keeping the spark alive? Firstly, because I was told not to have a bee pun in the title, but this is the reason I'm going for this is because volunteers, Older Citizen Science Project, want to do the project. They have signed up to do the project. They are interested in the project. They are already engaged with that project. So in some ways, retaining those volunteers is less about getting their interest. Hopefully you've done that. They're interested. It is keeping it. So you need to remove or prevent the barriers that might be coming into play for their continued engagement. You need to sort of reduce any waning interest. You need to get problems out of the way, or think of ways to deal with them if they do occur. So hopefully people will actually be getting more interested as the project progresses. So, like, not only were they interested to begin with, it's good to take part in, it's fun, it's something else that they're getting out of it, so that hopefully you will keep more people engaged with the work. So, headphones are falling off. Why would people join a citizen science project, and why do they stay? I'm not going to go hugely into recruitment because some folks have already talked about that, and I'm trying to stay to goal, but you might join a project because you're interested in the subject area, that you think it might be fun, that it may contribute to an area of science or conservation that you're really interested in, that you're keen on or you're passionate about, or it could be something where people are more interested in learning about the area, or perhaps are doing it with children, for example, like to learn more about either a specific type of critter or just generally about ecology. So all of these things will still be relevant. Like, the reasons you joined the project are still there, but then there might be other ones that come into play later on. So why might you stay in a project once you've joined it? Well, firstly, committed. I've started, so I'll finish. People tend to like finishing something that they've started. That's quite a nice little dopamine hit, a good thing for your brain. If they feel valued, they feel that they are contributing, they're doing something that they want to do, and that science is getting something out of it, that's really good feedback. The satisfaction of completing a project, completing something that may be kind of out of the ordinary of what you normally do, is brilliant. And that sense of community that you can get from doing a project in a big group, whether or not you've got actual communication directly between the participants, that's still quite a powerful factor. I have mentioned competition in there, and I'll come back to that because some projects do use more like gamification and like leaderboards and things. I'll come back to that one because honestly, I'm not motivated by competition, so I don't tend to focus on it too much, but it can be very popular. So that's sort of joining, staying, coming back. Often with citizen science, you want people to come back. You may be doing a project that is a multi-year project. So Bees and Beans was 3 years, and ideally I did want people to come back. Folks have already been to like the Bees and Heatwaves project. You want people to come back. Hoverfly Lagoons has been going on for yonks. You want people to come back. you have an extra strength in data that is repeated from the same place. So that's really valuable. Why might people want to come back? You know, they've already done the project. Do they want to do it again? Well, if they enjoyed it, they may well do. That was fun before. Hopefully it'll be fun now. They might have learned something from it and want to continue that learning or apply that learning, doing the same thing again from a position of better understanding. And they may want to see the progress of the project. You know, they saw what it did in the first year with them. They might want to see the progress of the project overall. What does it find? How does this iterative process of scientific development apply to this project that they're in? And how does the progress apply in their own gardens, in their own spaces where they're doing it? Like, what did I find last year? What did I find this year? Has there been a change? There is incentives to return that aren't just you sort of trying to persuade them. It's taking part of that whole broad area of why you want to do this project in the first place. So those are all the lovely bits. Now I'm thinking about why people might leave a citizen science project. I will not end on all the sad bits. I will go back to some more positive slides again, but now we're going to consider people have joined the project, they're already interested, why might they stop? And what might we be able to do about it to reduce dropout rates and increase return rates? We don't have to go through, they're going to go through each one of these. So can we mediate them? So the first bits I'm going to talk about are where things will happen that you probably have no control over and can't really do anything about. So sometimes things go wrong. I love using this graph. This is a graph that I made in 2015 for a Science in the Pub about bees and beans of what killed your project. People who genuinely wanted to do it and were very interested in growing their bean plants, what caused these plants to just die? Because stuff will just happen when you're doing a project out in gardens. And here is a selection of stuff. Slugs, obviously I was kind of expecting. Weather, kind of expecting. There's no detail in here, but weather also includes surprise early May hailstorm, along with rain and flooding. And then we got to the slightly daft ones where, you know, bees were killed off by chickens, puppies, guinea fowl, ridiculous circumstances. Never got any more information about what that was. Burglars trampling them, drunk teenagers was one that didn't actually go on this slide. There are a lot of things that can go wrong, and there is no way for you, as somebody who is running the project, to build in all the possible ways in which chaos can occur. That is fine. What you need to know if someone is dropping out because something went wrong is whether or not it was to do with the project design. Because random stuff happening, all you could really do is you know, reassure the person that you are very appreciative of their effort, thank them for letting you know, and see if they want to stay with the project the next year, which can happen. I had one quite memorable example during Bees and Beans, which was a volunteer who sent me a slightly panicked email at 6 in the morning because their entire garden had just been eaten by an escaped herd of Aberdeen Angus beef cattle that had broken down the fence. There was no way for me to build this into the project. I reassured said volunteer. They were, you know, they stayed engaged with the project. And actually, the next year they did it again and returned data. So it is possible to deal with even the most bizarre of circumstances. So random stuff happens. Life circumstances, as I've got down there, is a sort of a category of this, but it's more something that happens to the individual. And you don't need information about this. And in terms of data security, you often don't want information about this. But sometimes people can be really interested in doing the project and not able to do it now, whether, you know, broken a leg, moved house, other sorts of stuff. If you can get people to say, like, due to me, I can't do the project anymore, then you know it's not something that you necessarily have to fix. And this is more to do with you maintaining that good dialogue with them in communication than it is you needing to do anything about it. So those are the sort of random things. I'm just going to take a quick drink of water, hopefully away from the microphone to not cause audio poison. There we go. Then we have things that can cause people to become less engaged or drop off their interest in the project that you may be able to do something about, that are more to do with problems that happen that you can either mediate or adjust. So boredom. Some participants will get bored and leave. They will lose interest. This is fine. You expect a certain amount of attrition of a project, whether people have signed up because they thought it was very interesting at the time, or that their interest waned, or just generally. Now, there is some ways that you can mediate for this when you are designing the project, and part of this involves actually targeting populations who have a sort of pre-existing interest in that area. So for Bees and Beans, my first year I had a completely open sign up. You could just sign up if you'd heard about the project, which meant I filled my sign-ups really quickly, but also I got quite a rapid drop-off rate because it was people who went, oh, that's interesting, signs up, maybe not really like that involved with the area. So in subsequent years, I tried specifically to target gardeners. And the reason I tried to target gardeners is I had results from the first year which showed that your yields of beans coming from all the plants, including the one with a bag on it, was higher if you also were growing other broad beans, which is not exchanging pollen. No cross-pollination is happening because there is a bag on this one. So it's like, okay, if you already know how to grow broad beans, you are more likely to be able to grow them properly, which sounds a little bit obvious, but when you're thinking of a method, it's something to take into account. So targeting your population means that people have already got that higher level of interest. I might be less discouraged if something goes a little bit wrong or it's not looking the most fascinating at the time. So your loss of engagement is not necessarily due to project design, but it might be, and you need to find that out. So again, like I said, with life circumstances, you can't require like great details of people if they're going to leave a project. You can ask them to tell you if they're going to leave, because it also means that you're not emailing into the void, but you can ask them like a little bit of information as to why. So these aren't real numbers, pulling numbers out the air. If 5 out of 100 people leave your project, they might have just got bored. It's probably nothing to do with you. If like 25 out of 100 leave your project, you may need to do something about the project design, whether it becomes confusing at a certain point, whether some of your instructions are not clear, whether you're asking people to do too much, which is entirely possible that if you have asked them, there is often a tendency in science to think, oh, while I'm recording this bit of information, I can get this one, this one, this one, this one, this one at the same time. That can very quickly lead to people sort of running out of oomph and just like, I have to record this every single time. I thought I could do it, but it's getting really wearing. So when designing projects, I like to think, if I personally was not doing this as part of my job and was doing it entirely out of my own interest and the goodness of my little volunteering heart, would I still be bothered to do this if I was having a terrible week? And be very brutally honest with yourself of whether or not you could be bothered to do this. I have to stop doing, or rather, I was thinking about doing a project about pollination from night pollinators, like moths and things, and then realized that in order to have pollinators, that you have the plants only being accessed by nocturnal pollinators, you were going to have to take a bag on and off at dawn and dusk. And the time of the year when the most pollinators are around, dusk is about 11 o'clock at night, which might be doable, but dawn is 4 a.m. I will not be getting up at 4 a.m. I will not be asking the volunteers to get up at 4 a.m. I will do a different project or try and find a different method to do this. Feeling undervalued is another part of this. It may not be feeling bored that is causing people to leave the project, but they might be feeling that it's not really very important. They need to feel that their efforts are valued. This is citizen science. The citizen is a big pertinent part of this. You are probably, should be, ideally, collecting data with citizen science that you couldn't get any other way. So them being able to do this and then being willing to do this is really important. So you need to make sure that, you give people feedback, you give them encouragement, particularly if something is going a bit wrong or the weather isn't playing ball or it's going a bit wonky or their beans have been eaten by a lot of cows. Just giving them that encouragement with your own enthusiasm. You're doing this project, you want to do this project, you think this project is important, and so do they. So you need to sort of meet them in the middle and keep that enthusiasm level going over the course of it. This is particularly when the project is something that doesn't work. It can be very important to know that the project doesn't work, particularly if you are doing something like a pilot year. Like I didn't do a pilot year for bees and beans, mostly because I already knew how to grow broad beans. But particularly the pilot year was a little bit more the first year in a way, because if you're doing projects with the citizen science thing, like in gardens, no matter how much you have tested it out in your nice temperature controlled university greenhouses that do not have guinea fowl rampaging through them, you will not necessarily know all the ways in which there might be problems or things you might need to do differently in a real garden. So actually, this project didn't work is a really important thing to know. But people will often feel, discouraged or maybe embarrassed if their project didn't work. So ring, ring, ring the communication bell again, emphasizing to people all the way through, I genuinely want to know if it failed. And mostly I want to know if it failed because of something that I told you to do or didn't tell you to do. This is a really important bit of dialogue. So that I've got down there, managing that expectation of what you expect them to find, and how they tell you if something is wrong really helps with that. That you emphasize that you value negative results as highly as you value positive results. It really helps. And I've mentioned a bit about like undervalued is frustration, but sort of frustration is a wider topic. And frustration is one of those ones that's often more to do with experimental design. Like, are you asking them to do something that is either very unclear of why you're asking them to do it? Because let's be honest, in science projects, sometimes you're asking them to do something strange, or like one thing in particular that I've focused on in this slide that really annoys volunteers in citizen science projects is being asked repeatedly for information that isn't going to change. So not your observation, you know, kind of checking, are there bees here yet? No. Are there bees here yet? No. That's fine. That's the actual science. But the other bits, what's your postcode? What aspect is your site? What orientation is your site? These sort of things that you only really need at the start of the project. You need it once. And if you continue to ask it, or don't seem to like have paid attention to them, they will get frustrated. You will get feedback like, don't you already have this? I've given you this. Why don't you have it? Don't you remember me? You might have 500 volunteers in a year. No, you do not remember them individually, but that's, you know, you need to give reassurance that you remember that they are part of this project, this thing. So some of this will depend on the technology that you have available to you. Like as again mentioned in a previous talk, if you had a login, you had a site where people could log in, they could sign up, and you could have the backend database that has all of that information, postcode aspect, blah, blah, blah. Consent forms I've got on here as well as something that you might need people to do at the beginning, but you really need to make sure they're not getting the consent form sent to them every time they're giving you data back. That's going to be annoying. So if you've got a login database, that would be great. They are expensive, potentially hard to manage, etc. Sometimes you need to repeat things, like why are you constantly asking for their postcode? And it could be just because you're using that as a secondary identifier for that individual. So which John Smith are you? Are you the one in Cambridge or are you the one in Swansea? That's why you might be asking for that unchanging bit of information, like you're using it as a tag rather than as a postcode in a way. Essentially making sure that you explain to people why you're collecting anything, and which will also mean that when you are designing the project, you've got to be really sure why you are collecting everything. So hopefully you should not be collecting extraneous data. So this should reduce the frustration that people have with this. I think I come into another slide. I'm just going to say it here. Bad user interface design. If you're doing online things, frustrating user interfaces, stuff that doesn't display well in Internet Explorer because you designed it in Firefox, something that's not optimized for mobile because you've designed it for a computer. Those are also massive sources of frustration and will annoy people to the point they will leave. It is worth spending an extra week scrutinizing your ICT. That was all a bit negative. I just put this one in here to remind you that people want to do this project. They want to be involved with your citizen science project. They are already interested. We need to keep them there. So the previous ones I was talking about are more about the barriers that they can then face and the reductions of engagement that they can face just over the course of doing the project. So I'm now going to be, last couple of slides are talking about ways that you can just, you know, build that interest, build that sense of community, buoy up their enthusiasm over the course of doing it. Oops, she says, pressing the wrong button. Ring the communication bell. Community and competition is a thing. Because people are all doing the same project. They're doing the same project, and it's really good to be able to be in a community with other participants that are doing it. So you can talk about how it's going, what you found, anything weird or new or exciting, and like how you found this, all that. It's great to have community, can be very hard to manage. I would not advise coming up with a bespoke forum or like your own new social media or something for the project unless you really want to do that. I would more recommend figuring out the best way to use existing social media that people are going to be on. So, you know, hashtags with your Instagram and Twitter, X, Facebook, like potentially chat groups on Facebook, that sort of thing. It's social media that people are already familiar with and already on, so they can chat with each other and hopefully recruit more people that they know if they've got a positive word of mouth to talk to other people to do a little bit of advertising for you. And it allows them to not just feel that they're isolatedly doing a strange thing to a bean plant in their own garden. They are actually part of a big group of people doing a strange thing to a bean plant for science, which is much better. In-person stuff is great. We've had people talking, like Beth in particular had been meeting up with people in person and doing those in-person discussions, and that allows you to address, you know, individual concerns and things that specific people are interested in. Not always possible. with the Buzz Club and with Beats and Beans, like if you're doing a project over the UK, you are one person and can only be in one place. Webinars and live chats are a good way to substitute in for this. And one of the things that like is a weird advantage the Buzz Club has that I didn't have doing my PhD is the COVID pandemic, which means a lot more of the population are more au fait with Zoom and webinars and more able and willing and familiar with doing that. So you can get that advantage of that sort of face-to-face personal communication via the computer screen, because that's good. I've got videos and other multimedia methods there, which is mostly when you are providing information and you're getting people involved with the project, it's good to have a lot of different ways that people can engage with it. Some people engage better with a big thing of text, some people do better with videos, some people do better with like slideshows or images. Having those available for the project means that however you best like to take in information, you can get some of that. It also allows you to share things that other people have provided. Like the Buzz Club, we get some wonderful videos and photos and sort of things from people who are taking part of the projects. So it just gives you a much wider range of interesting stuff that you don't have to do it yourself, and it increases that sense of community. Competition, I said I'd mention just at the bottom here. A lot of projects do use competition very well. I know Zooniverse has got a bit more like leaderboards. I think Zooniverse has more leaderboards, but like things like that, like leaderboards, like anything that encourages people to maybe go out and do one more record, go out and do one more thing, because they might get something from it, or they might get credit, social credit. Can be very motivating. I am not personally motivated by that, so I don't really do it. So I haven't really got a lot of experience on the gamification side of it, but it is something that might be useful if your project is one that lends itself to that kind of incentivization. You have to be quite careful with it, but it can be really powerful. I've mentioned multiple forms of media and multiple forms there, and this sort of feeds into multiple methods of contact, like people being able to both contact you and return data to you in multiple ways. There's a couple of papers that have specifically looked at having multiple methods of data return increases the likelihood of you getting data return. Again, because people are more comfortable with different ways of sending information back. So this is particularly the case if you've used a lot of different methods of recruitment. Like if you've recruited everybody entirely online, you can have a reasonable assumption that those people all have email. But if you have, for example, with Bees and Beans, I had like a thing on the local TV, I had a couple of things in local newspapers and magazines, which meant that I was accessing a population of people who were not necessarily particularly like IT confident or IT users. So I needed to make sure that I had a postal address available, that I was providing envelopes, that I had a landline phone number available. And even with the Buzz Club, where we are much more online based, it is making sure that we've got an email address, we've got a Facebook messaging option, we've got lots of ways that people can contact us. And then when it comes to getting the data back, we always send out a recording form. Now, whether or not people want to edit that file directly, whether they want to print it off, write on it, take a photo, scan it in or something and send it back. We don't tend to encourage people to post stuff to us because we can post stuff to the university, but once again, it's an extra level of returns. But if people really want to post something, we've got an address that they can use. You just really want to make it easy as possible for people to get data back to you and to contact you, because if it feels like it's an extra chore for them to get back the thing, I'd ask you a question, or get back the thing that they are doing for you to you, it's very off-putting. So be as open to receiving occasionally people's entire harvest of broad beans in the post in an envelope. That will sometimes happen, but not always. And mostly you'll just get your actual recording forms back. Finally, for this, well, again, some folks have talked a little bit about this as sort of that building of capacity, that building of identification skills or knowledge base or interest. Something to happen after the project is a good way to keep people engaged with the project that they're doing. So keeping participants updated on their project. It's their project. They have done stuff for it. They have found data. What was found overall? What have they contributed to? What have they found? Where is that data going? What's happening to it? Nobody likes to think that they spent time doing something and it ended up in a filing cabinet. Like making really sure that people are very clear when they have, when a Guardian article, another article, a scientific paper or something has been published using the data that they helped generate. encourages people to do it. It's that nice feeling of, oh, I contributed to a thing. And they can also spot it in the wild. It's always fun to see things that you were involved with pop up on other things. And obviously for conservation and ecology, there is a lot of media out there that is conservation and ecology. Like Ellie's examples of spotting hoverfly lagoons popping up all over the world is also great if you are a person who has just done hoverfly lagoons rather than being Ellie herself. You know, oh, I did that, brilliant. So for that, this bullet point here, I'm saying, like, if you're doing publications, really try and make them open access. You know, you were collecting the data via other people. They were doing the work. You were doing work, but you weren't doing that work. So if you are then publishing something using that data, it's a bit cheeky if the volunteers that actually collected the data can't access it. Like, you could give all the participants a copy of the paper. That's okay. It would be better if it was open access. It, again, encourages that idea that this is a collaborative way of doing science, that you're not just dictating to them what they're doing. Having mailing lists for next stages, updates on the project if you're going to do anything else. You may need to collect a mailing, you may need to have a mailing list give you, a new one. I mean, so you may need to have a new confirmation that they want you to contact them about it, but it is worth setting something up for that to keep people informed. And the final bit is about action. So you are widening their involvement with the area. Are there any actions, activities, things that people can do after the project that helps with the subject of the project? Again, I can't remember which paper it is. It's somewhere in my list of things, but there have been things showing that having like an action increases people's agency and their sense of ownership of the subject area that they're doing. So like for Bees and Beans, I sent people information about sort of more bee-friendly planting and wildlife gardening and weeds. But yeah, having anything that someone could practically do because they now know more about a subject, they've invested time into it, they're probably a lot more interested and engaged with it. Well, what do they do next? And that means they're also a lot more likely to spread that information around, to like tell friends and family, this, you know, I now know more about how to do this thing and it's backed up by science. And then potentially to recruit other people to do your next round of the project when you decide to run it. So that is me. I think I am to time. This is what I say, quite a brief run through. I will finish off with, well, thanking you for listening and violently ringing the communications bell. Talk to people, really talk to people. They like it a lot. And that is me.
Thank you, Linda.
Oh, there we go.